Good morning, everyone, and I'm going to share my screen. And I hope everyone can see that. So thanks for joining us this morning. I'm going to be running through a little bit about the functionality of Spatial Modeler within Imagine and chatting about its history and why we use it and why I think it might be good for you to use it if you're not already, or some ideas as to how you might use it if you are already using Spatial Modeler. Here we are. We have ERDAS Imagine 2022. Oh, just by the way, version 2023 will be coming out late September, so look out for that. Let's load up some imagery. So I've got some Sentinel-2 imagery. It's from the 26th of May this year. It's level 2A, so it's been atmospherically processed, and it was in the middle of our mini heat wave at the end of May, and as such, it's absolutely lovely imagery. Here we've got the Isle of Wight heading up towards London, and I live around in that area there, so it's close to home for me. Now, generally, or a lot of people, if they're wanting to do work with the imagery, they'll traditionally use the ribbon interface and the dialog boxes that are incorporated into ERDAS Imagine. And that's great because it's a simple way to do stuff. If we go to raster and unsupervised, we've got a lot of tools available to us here. I'm going to have a look at the NDVI. And so that fires up the NDVI dialog box. And it already puts in a fair amount of information. It recognizes the data that we have in the viewer. It recognizes what type of sensor it is. It's not being too intelligent about that. It's just counting the number of bands and making a guess as to what it could be. You see there's other potential sensors there as well. And it's taken the NDVI. There's a whole heap of other indices that we could use here as well, but we selected NDVI. It gives us the formula for NIR minus the red band over NIR plus the red band, so we know what we are. And also it's populated the bands for you. We can click on preview here, and I'll explain a little bit more about that in a second. Let me just have a look at that, and we can equalize scales by going to soup and equalize scales. There we go. So now we have the same view within the two windows. And the reason that we can preview this data and it pops up instantaneously, and in fact we can add the inquire cursor and we can get real-time values for the NDVI, is because it's using the Spatial Modeler. And so if we actually have a look at this dialog box again, we've got a view button here, and a lot of the dialog boxes within ERDAS Imagine have this view button on. And if we have a look at that, this is the spatial modeler, spatial model that's running that NDVI behind the scenes. More and more of the processes are being converted into spatial models from the previous programming, and this has two benefits. One is that they're faster, they work better within ERDAS Imagine. And the second one is you can open them up and you can see what's going on. And this is great for us. This bit here is really the key section of the NDVI. There's a lot of other things which I won't go into right now, but this is the key section. We're selecting two bands, band 1 and band 2. We're subtracting, adding, dividing, and then we're outputting that to an output and to a preview operator, which is how we get to see it in the preview window. But if you're explaining the concepts of NDVI, then it's a spatial model is a really useful tool to help students understand what really is going on behind the scenes. And you can do that by just building an NDVI model really, really simply yourself. So let's do that. It's quick and easy. We've already seen the spatial model window, and down here we have the operators, and there is a whole heap of operators available. Spatial Modeler first debuted in ERDAS Imagine around about 10 years ago now. And since then, the vast majority of the technology advance and the development work that's been undertaken in ERDAS Imagine has been on the Spatial Modeler itself. And so there's been either a conversion of operators from dialog boxes into Spatial Modeler, or there's been the development of new functionality entirely within Spatial Modeler. And we can see that, for instance, in the classification group here, where we have an awful lot of machine learning and deep learning operators that are available to, that's even more than I thought, that are available to us. And all of those are exclusively within the Spatial Modeler. And so I always say, if you're an ERDAS Imagine user and you're not using Spatial Modeler, then you're not getting the full benefit of the software. Anyway, let's create that NDVI model. So first of all, we want to get the image in there. It's already in a viewer, so we can just drag and drop it easily into the model window. And then we want to select some bands. And so we want to do the band selection. And so this is where we can say, well, what bands do we need? We need the near infrared and the visible red. So we can just pick up and drag from our raster output into those two operators. And there we want the near infrared band, which is band 8 in Sentinel. And we want the visible red band, which is band 4 in Sentinel-2. We can actually rename these if we want to, and so that we can remember what these operators are, which is always good when you're coming back to a model, and really helpful for other people who are looking at models that you create as well. This is a graphical user interface for programming, essentially. And just like programming, it's really, really useful to annotate your models, and so that you do remember why you did certain things. Otherwise, as is so often the case with me, I come back to a model after a couple of months and think, why on earth did I do that? And wished former self had actually told my future self what I'd been doing. Anyway, now we want to subtract. And using the search operator within the operators box there is by far the easiest way for finding operators that we need. Generally, it's just a case of experimentation in order to find the operator, but something's usually there, and I'll come on in a second as later on as to other ways that you can figure out which operators are required. So now we're subtracting the visible red from the near infrared, we're adding the near infrared to the visible red, and now we want to divide those two functions, and then we can ping back and click on a preview. And let me just get rid of this viewer so we can see what's going on. And here we have the preview of the NDVI. And so we have just replicated the NDVI operator within the spatial model by ourselves, and that took just a couple of minutes to do. A lot of geospatial software have graphical models similar to this, so Esri, QGIS, Snap. They all have similar functionality. I've used pretty much all of them, and without my I'm selling ERDAS hat on, this is the most intuitive modeler that I've used and I've taught. It's incredible to me how quickly people pick up on this when I'm teaching them. I can start off, and I generally start off with a model something like this at the beginning of the day. And at the end of the day, my trainees are making models and finding functions that they're using to create information from data for their own particular problems. And it's always great to see just how quickly people pick up on the spatial modeler. So that's good for that. And now because we have a spatial model here, we can start adding things to it. And so maybe we just want to pick out the healthy vegetation from this data set. That's fine. Oh, I see I've already got it here on my recents. We can look at a greater than operator. And so we can pop that in. I have done this before in full disclosure. So let's put in a greater than 0.3, say. And this will pick out all the pixels within this data set which have a value of greater than 0.3. I can also add a port to this preview operator, so we can have multiple layers within the preview, and I'll add that into there. And there we go. We have thresholded the NDVI, and I'm saying that everything above 0.3 is good, healthy vegetation. Is that right? Maybe, maybe not. Let's have a swipe on here. We've got the bare fields here, which are not being highlighted. That's good. We've got some areas which maybe not quite healthy. So let's up that value a little bit. And we can go to 0.4. There we go. And that's probably more realistic split between healthy vegetation and non-healthy vegetation. But again, you can just adjust this value in here and it picks up on the fly. And it's a really neat way of being able to visualize and prototype a model for a particular data set and then run that out to other data sets as well. That interactivity is just great for designing models to pick out particular information from a data set. We can do some other work in here as well. We can see what other band combinations that we may have. Let's just close that transition. And so we can put some extra bands in here. I'm going to put another couple in. And hook that up again. And let's have a look at the visible green band, which is band 3, and the mid-infrared band, which is band 11. And then we can stack those together to get a 3-band data set using the NDVI as well. And so if we're trying to discriminate different types of vegetation, it's always good to experiment with what band combinations or what combinations of indices we have that can help us in that discrimination of vegetation. And so we can just pop that up into that input there. And it comes out. Okay, we're getting some discrimination there. But maybe we could do better. Let's have a look at that band 3. I want to keep that mid-infrared range. We've already got band 4 kind of included in the NDVI. That probably won't work so well. Let's go off into the red edge. A little bit more. Band 6. Oh, that's doing something. Let's highlight that. Go to the preview and let's enhance that a little bit. Yeah, there we go. That is doing a pretty good job of highlighting different vegetation types within this data set. And again, it's that kind of interactivity where we're just playing around with different band combinations that it makes the spatial modeler really, really useful and really intuitive to use. Now that's great. I always like producing colourful imagery, and this is definitely colourful imagery, but we want to get some useful information as well. So in order to do that, we've got some parcel data that we've derived from open data sources. And let's just bring in a small subset of that so that processing doesn't take too long, and fit that layer to the window. There we go. Actually, I'll just make those a little bit clearer. Let's go to the style and up that a little bit to 2 points so we can see what's going on. There we go. These aren't perfect parcel boundaries because they're not Ordnance Survey parcel boundaries. They've been derived from Land Registry and OpenStreetMap. And so there are issues with these parcels, but they'll do for giving an example of what we can do within the spatial modeler. And so now we have those boundaries. What we really want to do is get useful information from the original data set. And we can do that by looking at the statistics of the data from this stack of different bands in the NDVI. And so what we want to do is to bring that field boundary data set into the spatial modeler. And then we want to collect zone means. And this is where I know where the operator is. And so rather than searching for it, I whiz down to it. And we want to get raster statistics per feature. And so we can do that. And we pop those features into there and the raster into there. And then if we have a look at what we're doing here, we're computing the mean for each of these field boundaries, each of these parcel types. There's a lot of other statistics that we can compute there, but that's what we're doing. Just the mean, just again to keep things a little bit quick and easy. And then once we have that, we can start to classify the data as well. And so if we go up to the classification tab again, then there's a classify using k-means. And this is a unsupervised classification routine, which works on features. It takes a little bit longer to pop into the spatial modeler because it's based on Python. And so it fires up that in the background. We'll hook our data in. A number of classes, we can say, let's say 6 classes, and then there's something else I want to add in here, which is the classification attributes. The input data set, the input features has a lot of attributes associated with it. We're only interested in these ones, which are the means which have been calculated from this feature data set there. And there we go. Let's hook that up to a features output. And I'll do a class out too. And if you're paying attention, you can see exactly how many times that I've done this already. And then we have a model. And so it started off simply. We just did an NDVI. We added a couple of extra bands in. We played around with it to get the stack layers. I'm just going to set this off running in the background so that it actually completes. We did some thresholding to look at the NDVI, and then we've created the statistics for each of these parcels, and then we're going to classify them. Actually, one of the things that's useful in the one of the statistics that is useful in here is the standard deviation, because some of these parcels are quite homogeneous and some of them are a little bit more heterogeneous. And that gives us an idea as to maybe towards the texture of these parcels. But it also, looking at the standard deviation, might give us an idea as to if they're misclassified or if they've got multiple classes or multiple potential classes within each of these parcels. And so desperately trying to find one. This one, for instance, is over a forested area. It's going to have a larger standard deviation. And then here we go. Down here, we've got 2 very distinct classes in here. And that will have a high standard deviation if we'd calculated that. Okay, that looks like that's done. And so we'll just dismiss that. I got an error there. I'm not sure what that was related to. I didn't pay too much attention to it. Let's see if we've got something decent out of it. So let's go to the output and have a look there. And then we want to style up these polygons using the class name, generate new styles, and there we go. Okay, so in about 20 minutes, we've looked at the spatial modeler, and we've actually produced an unsupervised classification from parcels over this over a part of this data set, having selected the bands that we wish to use, or bands and indices that we wish to use for the classification. If we again have a quick look and see how this has gone, let's have a look at this type of land cover. Yeah, I'm not sure what it is, to be perfectly honest, but that's coming out light blue, and it's kind of coming out light blue in other related areas. Like I say, it's not perfect, but it's not bad either. And we've got these kind of blues, which again are coming out as a green class there. And so it's done a pretty good job in the absolutely minimal amount of processing that we've done in the last 20 minutes or so. I hope that's shown just how quickly you can actually use Spatial Modeler to define a flow line, and how you can see graphically within the Spatial Modeler what's happening to the data set all along the way. And so we're starting off with the inputs, we're going through the processing of the raster data, we're adding the statistics into the features, and then we're classifying those and we're getting the output. And so it's entirely clear and obvious throughout the Spatial Modeler what's going on, and you can see exactly what making changes, or any changes you make, what that might affect in the output. And you can hopefully use the prototyping using the preview to create a really effective model for whatever application that you're hoping to achieve. I started off with Spatial Modeler with no training at all. So sure, I was familiar with remote sensing concepts and so on and so forth, but essentially I picked this up entirely by myself. I haven't had any formal training in Spatial Modeler. However, that's not ideal, and like I say, the trick is really not so much how to use Spatial Modeler, it's just where to find the operators that are useful for the kind of things that you want to do. And there's some help available for that. So for starters, let's just bring this across. Here at Geospatial Insights, we've started producing a fair amount of videos which does exactly that. And so we've got some top tips, we've got some other tips for other parts of Hexagon software as well in Map Enterprise. But if we have a look at the list here, then we've got videos which describe pretty much what I've been doing today, and then other things as well which address other basics within the Spatial Modeler. And I think this suite of videos is a really good starting point to again, get up to speed really quickly in Spatial Modeler. They're kind of the things I do in my one-day training course. And like I say, after one day, people are really dangerous in Spatial Modeler, and they can start doing some real damage and start getting some really useful models together. We also have the Hexagon community. And we'll make these links available. But on the community site, then there's a whole heap of models, either snippets which demonstrate useful techniques within the Spatial Modeler, or whole models which you can pick up and use and adapt as you wish. And so here, for example, is the burned area index for Sentinel-2. A scary looking model, but as with so many of these things, it's actually relatively straightforward once you start to break it down. And yeah, I mean, once you see the formula there, then you can see why it might be getting a little bit more tricky. And a description about it as well. And you can download the model as well and open it up in your own version of Imagine, and then start playing with that as well. There's also the Spatial Modeler e-training course, where again, Hexagon, very similar to us, have produced a series of videos and other resources that, again, start off with the basics and then start walking you through some examples which incorporate some techniques. A little caveat on these: some of these were built with previous versions of Spatial Modeler, and operators have been enhanced and updated. And there's one or two instances in here where they don't directly relate to operators which are now available within the Spatial Modeler. And the final way that we can, or you can start getting a kind of a lift up with Spatial Modeler, shipped with the software. If we go to IC program files, Hexagon, current version, and the etc directory, there's a models directory here. And if we search for .gmdx, then there is a whole heap of models which are shipped with the software itself. And so, for instance, if I can close that and go back to here, let's just turn everything off so we can't see that, and open up a new spatial model window. What should we do? Let's have a look at the reproject one and bring that in there. And again, this is fairly complex, but there's a whole heap of models which are shipped with the software. And again, you can find them and start to see what's going on within the model. And if you're looking for a particular thing to do, then having a look through those models as well is a really good way of familiarizing yourself with the models and how they can potentially be used as well. I'm just going to check my notes to see that I've said everything that I want to say. There's one thing which I haven't got an example of, because this is still ERDAS Imagine version 2022. Coming next in the next version of Imagine is some extra functionality to the Spatial Modeler, where you have live links to Google Earth Engine. And this is a real game changer for a Spatial Modeler, because that means that graphically you're going to be able to hook up to all the data within Google Earth Engine. And as educators, I think you get free access to the data in Google Earth Engine. And so all of those resources become immediately available within the Spatial Modeler. And so you'll be able to collect data, select data, process data either in Google Earth Engine, or you can convert it to data onto your machine. And then you can mix it with local data as well and produce either local output or output on the cloud. It's going to be a huge enhancement to the Spatial Modeler. I'm really excited to be able to start to use it when it comes available in September. But that's something definitely to look out for in Q3 of this year. Okay, I think that is everything that I'd like to say now. Thanks, everyone.